and our guests are the Yonkers Mayor, Mike Spano, and Yonkers Police Commissioner, Mr. John Mueller. The reason why we are here is because we want to talk about the issues affecting the city, and we want to know from the people who make decisions on behalf of the city how they see the problem. So thank you both for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Mayor, Commissioner, I know there are certain questions that it's more for the Commissioner, but you are the man in charge of the city. You are the one who appoints your commissioners. So, Mayor, we have a problem in the city. We went, certain outlets, media outlets, are saying that we dropped from 2 to 7, even though I think the FBI is saying from 2 to 3rd. So what are the correct numbers?
Well, we always derive our number from the FBI. So we're always talking apples to apples. Always talking about the same thing. And so we are now the 3rd safest city of our size in all of America, according to FBI statistics. And you know, we're not far off from first. And don't forget, we have been sitting at first for many years as well. And so we're not far off from first. There are reasons that we could talk about. I'm sure we'll talk about as this interview goes on, as to why you might see this. But for the most part, we're happy with the overall trending of crime, except for gun arrests, and we can talk again. We should talk about those. But other than that, the Commissioner will share with you our statistics as they are as of today.
Commissioner, your officers are the ones that engage with the community.
Yes.
They are the ones that make the arrests.
Yes.
You're in contact on a daily basis with your officers and those that are being arrested, one way or the other. Okay? The feeling that the people of Yonkers are having is that arrests, crime in Yonkers are going up, like they never seen before. I tell them that's not always true. Maybe you have people like me that are exposing the crime more than ever before. So you create that sense of things are worse. How do you see it, sir?
So if you look at the actual statistics, and you're right, that, you know, always with crime there's a perspective issue, you know, and sometimes it's not always an accurate, you know, depiction of what's really happening on the ground. So if you just take this year, right now, starting January 1st of 2021 till now, the most recent statistics, we're down, I believe, 16% in property crimes, and we're down 5% in violent crime. And those percentage decreases have endured for the last 3 years. And the other thing I want to mention, and the mayor touched on it, is we have to compare apples to apples. You know, a lot of times we make this comparison between ourselves and cities of our size in other states. That's a difficult, it's not apples to apples, that's apples to oranges, because they may have different laws. We know that bail reform has changed a lot of things, and it's made things more challenging for us in New York State that maybe, you know, our neighbors in Connecticut or our neighbors in Florida or anywhere else in the United States of our size hadn't. So the real, like the most accurate, I think, comparison is within New York State. And if you look at our numbers within New York State, the cops and the YPD is just crushing it. We are the big 5. You have New York City, you have Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, and Yonkers. And we are by far the lowest when you compare that. I think that's more of an accurate approach because you're comparing, they're up against changes in the law just the way we are. So it's really a much better way to compare it. And when you look at those numbers, we're doing really well.
Well, Commissioner, I want to talk just about the Yonkers. As you said, we don't want to compare, you know, states, because different laws, different ways of handling the situation. So we want to state about Yonkers. Is there a connection between bail reform and the feeling that crime is going up?
So what I would say is, when bail reform came out, we saw a considerable increase in particular in property crimes. It does extend to violent crimes to a point, but it really hits to the heart of property crimes. We actively engage our legislative group here, Senator Mayer, Senator Cousins, Senator Jamal Bailey. They allowed us to come to the table. We had a conversation, and we did make some, the legislation made some minor changes that didn't really change the spirit of what they were trying to do. It did not increase our enforcement footprint at all, but we saw numbers go down after those changes were made. I would advocate that we can probably do a little better and do some more changes. Again, minor changes that do not increase our footprint. It's also important to point out that in the last 3 years, I believe, or at least this year, we're down 20% in arrests. So 3 years ago, we're doing 20% less arrests, and we're still maintaining crime at low levels. So there is a recognition there that mass incarceration doesn't work. You can prove it, and we're still being able to be effective. But it's always about, and you and I always talk about this, Ben, it's always about that subset of persistent misdemeanor offender and that persistent violent offender that drives most of our numbers. Small group of people, big footprint in crime and quality of life.
You know, let me talk about, we talked about this reform legislation, and many people have spoken about it because there was a lot of merit to changing the laws. We all talked about the individual, the young teenage boy that was, in a New York City jail, ended up committing suicide, right, over nothing. I understood the reason for us to look at these laws, but remember what happened a couple years ago. Albany decided to make big reforms to those laws. They never talked to the judges, they never talked to the district attorneys, they never talked to the police commissioners, they never talked to the mayors. They did these reforms in the middle of the night and attached them to the New York State's budget. So no one even had a vote on them. I mean, think about that. I mean, you either voted no on the budget or no on bail reform. It just wasn't done in a way and in a manner where I think we could have made some reforms and we could have done a lot of things. And now what do we have? Okay, let's look at, the gun violence or the gun arrests are up over 100%. That's probably what people are seeing and what they're feeling. And why is that? Well, because and I'm sure that if we did studies, I would be proven right, but you're seeing that the older gang members are moving guns to the kids. And the kids are now have guns. Why? Because the laws are a little different. I get why we pass these laws. We don't want to put mostly young men of color in jail. We're not talking about that. What we want to do is find the most violent of individuals and get them off the streets. That's what we ought to be doing. And just like I said, it was just 2 weeks ago that we were up on Elm Street again, or up on one of the tree streets again. And so it's not easy. New York State's got to open their mind and say, how can we do some reforms that make sense so that we're not having the reverse effect. We want a safer community, and we want a community where people, especially people who live on Elm Street, deserve to know that they can walk outside, walk with their son down the street, and not be shot. They deserve to know that. But because of the amount of weapons that are ending up in the hands of kids, we're not seeing that. And we're not seeing it just here in Yonkers. This is all across America, but certainly right here in New York State.
Well, it was 3 weeks ago that Oak Street, I believe, a young boy, 4 or 6, between
6 years old.
6 years old, got shot by other teenagers.
Right.
Gladly, police department acted quickly, and within 45 minutes, he had the people under arrest. But there is many people out there, Commissioner, that are saying, show me the numbers. We hear about the bail reform, but they're not seeing the numbers. I actually interviewed somebody yesterday, and I mentioned the connection between bail reform and repetitive offenders that are arrested today and released in a matter of hours, 24 hours. The person told me, show me the numbers. I don't know if that is true. Are those numbers available?
Yes, I can definitely share them with you. And we have graphs that can really articulate the point and illustrate it in a way that everybody can understand. Every crime category has top offenders. Every crime category. A lot of it deals with the science of addiction, in particular in the property crimes, where people are driven by drug addiction and they have to offend every single night if they want to get, especially if it's a heroin addiction, and not get sick. So the answer is to focus on this small group. We can show you it almost works inversely. When these top 25 offenders are in custody, our crime stats are very low, especially in burglaries and larceny from auto crimes. When they're out of custody, they go through the roof. So you can see it. It just works inversely with those 2 points. I think there's other ways to do it, and like I said, we're grateful for the legislature to allowing us to come to the table in July and making those changes, but I think we can do a little bit more. Like one of the recommendations I would believe, like personally, I don't believe cash bail should be on the table. Like, I don't think one person that has more money than somebody else should be able to get out of jail, and then the person with no money has to stay in jail. But there's other things you can do. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So you can, for example, you can do a threat matrix. You can say if a person has a certain amount of arrests, if a person fails to return to court on the existing arrests, if a person is rearrested after being arrested initially. These are all metrics you can put together and make a matrix to say, this gives, and again, it's not the police, it's not the mayor, all we're asking is to give the judge discretion and latitude to take a look at each individual case, which they were doing anyway, and make a determination. This person we may want to set bail on based on past criminal history, based on the crime, based on failure to appear counts in past instances in this person's criminal history, and then they can make a decision. Again, it's not the police making the decision, it's the judiciary.
So we need to make it clear that, well, most people understand and agree with bail reform. The disagreement comes on how it was implemented, how it was done. Some people,
That was my big problem.
exactly.
My big problem was the way it went about. The political will was there to do it. We didn't have to do it the way we did it.
Exactly. But many people are also blaming the police department, because I believe they misunderstand that police are not judges. You're still doing your job regardless of police reform or not police reform. You're making the arrests. What happens after the arrest, it's up to somebody else, judges. But do judges have discretion now, sir, to keep a person in, or there is no discretion?
There is some discretion. Some of those conversations that we had in early, late spring last year resulted in changes as of July 1st. And that's when you can see a statistical drop in those crime categories because we had a little more latitude. I think there's more we can do. I think it's my job and people like me to share with the legislators that, you know, you can keep the public safe with a very small enforcement footprint as long as you're focused on the right people. And, you know, things like a threat matrix, that kind of is the best of both worlds.
If you don't mind, I need to point out, you know, here in Yonkers, you know, because we're the fourth largest city, right? But we're still small enough that we kind of can reach out and touch everybody. But when you know, every week or so, when the commissioner, deputy chiefs, and the brass come together, Comcast, they look at a board and they go, okay, well, all right, these are the crimes that are happening in the city. There's seems to be a rash of burglaries here. There seems to be something else going on here, and we're able to focus like a laser on those categories. And what we've seen, and what has worked out really well for the police department, and the commissioner could probably speak better than I can on this, is that we've also established kind of like, you know, the top hit list. You know, right? Those who are committing these crimes over and over and over again. The active shooters. I mean, so you almost, because we're small enough, we can understand, but we're big enough that you see a real impact on crime. I mean, you know, since 2011, crime in this town has gone down 40% overall, and that's a credit to the police department. Yonkers relatively has always been a safe city, but you know what? It's safe for who? It's safe when? It's safe. Is it safe when something happens to a loved one? For me, no. I'm going to say it's never safe, right? We have to go by the statistics to see where we stand by comparisons. But we, and I wouldn't be happy unless there are no murders and are no burglaries, and that's obviously what I want to see. But these guys have done a great job in just managing the city, managing and identifying the crime and attacking it in a very, very targeted way, so that we're getting those who we should be getting.
Now, Commissioner, I'm going to, with your permission, I'm going to make your words my words. What about tonight?
Yes. So what Ben is referring to is that I always ask when people come up with, you know, great ideas, expansive ideas, you know, different ideas that are out of the box, but they're ideas. So you have to go from the conceptual to the practical, where you're actually implementing them. And until, like for example, we'll talk at the mental health issue. We'll say, do we think that mental health practitioners should be responding to nonviolent mental health calls when people in crisis? I say 1,000%, sure. But that's not in place right now. So that's the what about tonight. What about tonight? What do we do tonight? Tonight the cops are going to respond. Because traditionally police have always been the default switch for every problem. Because we're the only ones that are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on Christmas, on Easter, on New Year's, on 4th of July. So it's easy to kind of just use us as the default. Putting together a really a robust and very comprehensive mental health response, there's a lot of things you have to consider. Are psychiatrists and mental health workers going to want to work on Christmas? Are they going to want to work a midnight shift? Are there enough of them if someone's sick or on vacation? What if there are 7 or 8 mental health crises in Yonkers all at one time? How do you triage that? So these conversations are great, and again, I think you'll find most police professionals will embrace, adding a component or having mental health practitioners take it. But as far as the point you make, what about tonight? You have to make sure that you have enough coverage for that.
Now, we're going to move to the serious problem in Yonkers. Actually, it's a serious problem all over New York State and probably the country. But we are talking about Yonkers. Fentanyl. I know there is a investigation going on that you are probably not at liberty of talking about it, but we need to hear about it. The mom at home might need to know, kids might need to know what to do, what not to do. We all know that you shouldn't be taking drugs, but the reality is...
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because I don't mean funny in a ha-ha way, I mean funny. We're in a situation now, right, where we've just legalized, marijuana, right? You can't really buy it anywhere, right? But we legalized it, right? And so there's a little bit of a mixed message, I think, out there for our kids. And I supported legalizing marijuana. I'm not in any way speaking ill of that. Just feel like there's this little mixed message going on right now. I have a 17-year-old, 19-year-old, and a 21-year-old, so I know full well what they think.
All them guys.
Yeah. There are still people in our community who want to go out and experiment or buy illegal drugs, right? So if it's pot or if it's a pill, an opioid, something like that, these are drugs that are coming at them illegally, through illegal means, that are being produced illegally, that are being laced with drugs and things that we don't know about, fentanyl being one of them. We've seen some tragic incidents here in Yonkers, as you know, where individuals have purchased drugs and they've been laced with fentanyl and they've died. We all know people who died from opioids. We all know more than one. But what we're seeing here are, like I said, are people who are getting drugs illegally that are laced with a chemical, and obviously that's a dangerous thing. So how do we tell the public, right? Which is what I hope we're doing today. Exactly. How do we tell the public? At the same time, how do we let Commissioner Mueller do his job? Because we don't want to tip off the bad guys, And so that's been the balance we're trying to strike all the time. But the public should know that we are actively pursuing anyone and any lead that can be given in our direction, anyone who is selling drugs, and that we could trace back, especially if it's being laced with some chemicals. I mean, the Yonkers Police is very active on that. I'll let the commissioner talk about it, but just know the public should understand that that is a #1 priority of ours. Now, we may not talk about it all the time for reasons the commissioner can maybe explain better than I can, but it is a priority.
Well, that's exactly my point. Because you're not talking about it does not mean you forgot about it.
Right.
Okay, it's still going, like you don't want to tip the bad guys, but the investigation is ongoing. Commissioner, you might want to say something about it, and also touch on the subject of the two police officers on Ravine. Was that related to fentanyl?
Okay, so the first thing I'd like to speak about is we have a great not-for-profit here in Westchester County called Student Assistance Services. And if you're interested in the impacts of drug abuse, whether it be marijuana or opiates or anything, and mental health and wellness, you can go on this website, Student Assistance Services. But there's a concept out there called perception of risk. And that's what the mayor is referring to when we talk about young people using marijuana. That if you look at the states that have legalized marijuana, and now they have about a 5-year track record of what has taken place, Colorado, Washington State, I believe there may be a few others, but the perception of risk, what happens is perception of risk works inversely with whether something's legal or not. So when elected officials legalize something, it's mainstream, it's adult, there is a lower, the perception of risk is lower for young people to think that there's any danger to it. So I think those conversations that you have to have, like the mayor, I have 3 kids too, that are all around the age, 21, 19, and 14, that you want to look and see what the dangers are. And the other thing about the legalization of marijuana, there's a lot of unforeseen consequences, I think, that we run into. And my fear is, to some degree, that, you know, particularly in communities of color, similar to, I get complaints all the time in community meetings. Why do certain neighborhoods have more liquor stores? Why do certain neighborhoods have more bodegas? Are they going to have more marijuana shops? If that's the case, and then is there advertising that goes with that? And if you look at how the marijuana industry is shaping up, big tobacco's going to play a major role in that. Philip Morris just made $1 billion purchase, I believe a $4 billion purchase in Ontario, which is a Canadian grow company. These guys spend all day and every day trying to figure out how to trigger your brain for you to want something. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing and research about how to get people interested in a particular product. Are my kids now, or my kids of color in this community, going to walk by places and there's going to be Joe the Camel like we saw years ago? We finally got that solved, and now it looks like we're going to circle back to that. And again, we have different opinions about the legalization of marijuana. I understand about the impact it had on communities of color. I understand, but there's also other aspects of it that we really need to be mindful of. Quality of life. What about people in the community that don't want to smell it? And now we're at a point where we have to say, well, we have no choice. There's nothing else we can do with the police department. I hate saying that. You know I hate saying that to anyone. But the truth is, if you can legally smoke marijuana anywhere you can smoke a cigarette, you know, we have very limited tools to try to deal with that with respect to the people that don't want to have to deal with it.
Now, Commissioner, let's talk about another truth. Okay, I've been going around the street and I have seen many arrests being made and guns recovered. And many times those guns are recovered because that is the smell of marijuana coming out from the car that triggers a search, a legal search. New York Post released an article saying it's going to be a problem now. If you stop a car that has a smell of pot in the car, you can no longer search that car because it's legal.
Yes, correct.
So how you connect now or reconcile?
Yeah, and it's weird too, because again, it's going to be one of these things that we're going to have to adjust to, because if you go to a car and see an open bottle of liquor, if I'm correct, you can search that car. So how you could smell a mind-altering, you know, or you know, I forget what you call it, but if you smell pot and not have probable cause, I don't understand that, because you'd have it in alcohol. If you smelled alcohol, you'd have probable cause. So how come if you smell pot, you don't?
Because you might smell pot, but not using pot. It's a very strong. I remember an apartment here on Yonkers Avenue.
Right.
The whole neighborhood was smelling like.
That's the quality of life issue that the YPD is forced to deal with, is that not everyone wants to smell this. So now we have a constituency that doesn't want to smell it, and a constituency that wants to smoke. So how do we find some kind of a happy balance where people can use it because it's legal, and the other group that doesn't want to smell it, how do we handle that? It's complicated.
Well,
it is complicated.
It's a nice conversation, and we could go on for the entire afternoon, sir, but we have to conclude sooner or later. But
we have to have more conversations about the kids, because their perception is this is no big deal.
And Mayor,
Right?
I don't know if you,
I talk to my own kids all the time, and like I said, and I supported legalizing it, but I'm afraid when they look at me and go, your beer is a lot worse than a joint down.
we should have more conversation, Mayor, and you have no idea how much the city appreciates dialogues like this. Because until not long ago, this wasn't possible. Reaching a police commissioner was not easy, almost impossible. Talk to the mayor, next to impossible, because you have other things. So the cyber world of today allows us to have that bridge that the people of the city you represent and the city that you enforce the laws can actually say, Commissioner, what about this, what about that? Not sure if they're going to agree with everything you say. I don't. But I respect that you are reachable. I can reach and ask those questions. Well, Commissioner, I don't want to conclude this without talking about the recruitment that is going on.
Thank you.
It's important.
It is.
Okay, and I like your slogan, be the change. Let's talk about being the change, sir.
So Be the Change is our recruitment campaign. One of the things we realize going through the reform process is that we really don't have a good wheelhouse with respect to marketing. We're just not built that way. So it's important for us to try to see how other entities are doing it. And we felt like, you know, on the heels of all the things that happened last summer, the murder of George Floyd and everything since then, that it was a great message to send our kids, our young people in Yonkers to want to be part of the change. To get off social media and get out here and be part of the change, be the change. So thanks to the mayor, we embarked on a very rigorous and robust 16-week, 36-hour test prep program. It's either Zoom or it's in person. The applicants seem to really be having a good time with it. We'll be there tonight. And of course, we'll have other tutorials. But the mayor committed about $88,000 for test prep, which is huge, because we know that with this exam, last exam, it only happens every 4 years. And last round of the exam was 2017, and we had 5,500 applicants, and we don't even get below 90. So you have to score a 90 or higher to even be considered for the job. So it's very important that we put our kids and our young people, I shouldn't say kids, but I have kids my age that are eligible. They're not going to do it, but they're 21. We want to put them in a position to succeed as best we can. At the end of the day, it's on each individual applicant. How much time are they going to put in? Some people can understand a concept within 2 or 3 hours. Some people it takes 30 hours. If you want it bad enough, every single person who wants this job can get it. It's about you. It's about how much time you put in, how much effort, and it will pay off. It's a $75,000 starting salary.
It's good. And I'm glad we're talking about this, because it kind of fits hand in glove with everything we've been doing. Obviously, we have to do more in terms of education, especially for our community, because there are 2 different educational systems. One for those who can afford it, one is who can't. Usually the ones who can't are children of color, right? And you should not be surprised that you're not getting a lot of children of color in that 100 percentage point because of the educational system. So we have to figure out ways to offset that, and we're working with the state capital on some ways that we can maybe add some points. But we're looking at that. Coffee with a cop, pizza with the police, the Explorer program, all the different things that we've put in place that allow the police to be in the community, in touch with our kids. Because when they see a police officer and they can talk to a police officer, and especially if the police officer looks like them, then they're inspired to be one themselves. So this $88,000 that the council put in the budget, that we supported and the commissioner took to help young people be able to take the test. Maybe we can push them from an 85 to a 90, because if we push from 85 to a 90, then we can grab it, because New York State law limits a mayor as to zones. So I can only pick people from a zone. If I'm in the 100 zone and there's 100 people and 5 African American, you know what? I have to pick all 100. But I'm only going to get 5 African Americans. So when you see the class, Ben, you're gonna see a class that's pearly white. And so we have to do something to change that. I have to be able to pick in different tiers. But until that happens, let's work on getting our kids higher scores. Let's work on getting our kids excited about being police officers. Our number of black officers in the city has doubled since 2011. But that's still a minuscule number.
But that was the big problem. We don't see.
So now we need to change that, and we're heading in the right direction.
Right. Commissioner, use the tool to promote the recruitment, the tool that we are using today. Social media is very powerful. That's where people are, that's where people are talking, and that's where we are changing mindsets. And when you have a dialogue going on about the positiveness of law enforcement, maybe you're going to get some of people saying, I should try. Let me check it out.
I think it's a great point, and I think the one thing we have to understand, and we've said this many times, you know, with all of the division and divisiveness and some of the real challenging relationships that communities of color have with law enforcement, you can't have a 5-minute conversation with a black kid in the library and say, you should be a cop. So these relationships have to develop way, way earlier. And that's what the mayor's talking about with respect to some of the outreach programs, the cadet program. The Yonkers Force I'm very proud of. We have a number of former Yonkers High School
That was actually
Force.
Yonkers at the Force, the football team,
Yeah.
was a great hit with the Yonkers.
And you know, in the vision that you have, that we did not have in the past, able to connect with the police commissioner is going to change the perception of the police department as well. Because you talk to the people. People can ask you. They don't see you as up there and I can never reach, I can never talk about the problems. So I think YPD in 5 years or 10 years will be a totally police department than we had 20 years ago, for the best.
Yeah.
So thank you both, and thank you all for watching, and until next time. We do this because of you. Thank you.